If you have any interest in photography, then I'm sure you've come across quite a lot of rules. Creativity though, and photography is supposed to be fun. And whoever had fun following rules? Lawyers and accountants, maybe. Actually, they're both probably quite terrible examples. I've treated photography as a series of small experiments for as long as I can remember. But the more we listen to idiots on YouTube, the more we can restrict ourselves, often unknowingly. This video is all about how the rules of composition can be useful, but how the real progress is made when you step away from them. I'll also go into my kind of curious take on how I compose my photos. I've always found it pretty interesting that they are referred to as rules. Rules basically suggest that they have to be followed. They're more guidelines, I suppose. They're useful things to pick up earlier on in your photographic journey to help you put together an idea of how a photograph works, how the human brain interprets imagery, I suppose. The problem is that once you're aware of these guidelines, they become restrictive and your photography doesn't grow beyond them. You need to let go of them to be able to further your progress. I find that if you don't let go of these rules, your photography can become a bit formulaic and predictable. And who wants that? When I'm out taking photos, I don't really think about diagonals and third lines and balance and all kinds of stuff like that. And I'm not sure I ever did. I mean, I learned the rules of composition guidelines quite early on, but I never remember a time where I considered a scene and actually thought about them. I've often wondered if the way I compose photos is actually a bit weird, but it works. And I think it works because I'm not applying these restrictions to what I'm doing. So when it comes to composition, the first thing I ask myself is, how can I arrange this scene neatly? Actually, that's not true at all. I'll come back to that. Initially, I don't really think at all. I walk around, I look and I observe and I try to notice things that catch my eye. I look for things that intrigue me. That's how I find a subject. Everything I point my camera at has to appeal to me in some way, whether that be that it looks nice or tells a story, which I spoke about in my last video. If it doesn't do any of these things, then no amount of compositional rule applying is going to turn that into a good photograph. Interestingly, I think one of the most harmful things about these rules are the emphasis that it puts on the composition. Composition is just a small piece of a photo. It's not just about how it's arranged, it's about what it's of, it's about the feeling it invokes, it's about the story that the photographer is telling with the image. Composition helps to bring it together, but that doesn't make the good photograph. So if you don't know what to point a camera at, think about what naturally intrigues you. Think about what you're interested in, what you're drawn to, and take pictures of that. And if you still don't know, there's a link to my What to Shoot guide in the description below that will help you hopefully decipher what to shoot. So once I've got my subject, and I'll come on to light in a bit, I'll ask myself, how can I make those components work together in a frame? How can I arrange them neatly? And what does that even mean? How can I make this scene work so that you want to look at it for longer and not just move on? As you can see, the colours are absolutely incredible at the moment near me, and unfortunately I've just not been able to get out much the last few weeks. There's been a lot going on and I've just not had the motivation to go out and shoot, which sometimes is hard to come by, and we can often need something to give us a little boost. When I'm out here, I remember what it is I love about it and I get so immersed in it straight away. And I think when we're sat at home, when the weather's not great, that can often be something that we forget. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot recently, which is why I've partnered with this week's sponsor, who are Outdoor Photography Guide. And they've been helping me reconnect with this side of photography. If you haven't heard of Outdoor Photography Guide, they're an online home for outdoor photographers. There's hundreds of videos, lessons, tutorials for people that spend their time doing this, being outdoors, taking photos. They've got videos about landscape photography, gear, macro photography, post-processing, wildlife, everything that the outdoor photographer needs to know. And what I really like is how real and relatable it all feels. The lessons are practical, full of insight, and most of all, they motivate you to grab your camera and head outside to places like this. The videos have inspired me to experiment and explore more and spend time finding these moments that bring so much more pleasure than sitting at home alone with my overthinking brain. Now, if you want to see what this is all about, the first 1,000 of you that click on the link in the description below will get an entire year's membership for only $1.49. That can't be right. $1.49? No, that is right. If you're a new customer, it is only $1.49. So it's a brilliant and apparently insanely cheap way to stay inspired and keep learning about outdoor photography without the usual distractions. Right, back to my curious take on photographic composition. So when I've got my scene, I'm really careful to pay close attention to the entire frame. This is why honing the ability to get really immersed in photography without being distracted is probably one of the most important skills you can build on. I'm generally looking around the frame and looking at what intersects with what. Is anything crossing over that feels distracting? Does the frame feel okay to me, or are there things in it that feel a bit jarring? What's happening around the edges of the frame? Generally, when I'm composing, I'm moving left and right and up and down, and I'm not necessarily doing this a lot. It's just little adjustments as I'm piecing everything together. It's often incredible how much of a difference that these small movements can make. This is a really simple example I shot the other night, and it's just a road and a tree. And I saw this and I thought the light was quite nice, and I liked the way the road came up to it, and I just pointed my phone at it, and this is what I got. And just by taking 4 steps forward, I was able to completely eliminate the corner of the house and the intersecting tree on the right hand side and get this much simpler shot. This obviously isn't an amazing shot, but it just shows a really good example of what taking 4 steps forward will do to a composition. I think this is also one of the reasons that I don't like tripods very much. I feel like they restrict me and they restrict my movement, and I prefer to just be moving about all the time. Basically, I can't stay still. In short, in all of this movement, what I'm trying to do is tidy the scene up, making sure elements don't overlap each other and making sure that the edges are as tidy as I can make them. I've spoken a lot recently about how my favourite photos aren't something that are just nice to look at, but they're also something that make me feel something. How things are positioned, how elements in the frame interact with each other can actually have a surprising impact on how an image feels. Things having space feel a lot more comfortable to look at than a mess of intersecting elements. When something looks off in a photo, it's normally because it is, and it will feel off as well. And that is often why a lot of the scenes that you look at that you think will make a nice photo sometimes don't, is because the elements aren't arranged properly and something is jarring or intersecting or distracting you from what should be a nice image. A lot of this is actually really hard to explain because so much of it is tied to how I feel about something rather than the technicalities of an image. Technicalities are quite easy to talk about, whereas when it's tied up in feeling and emotion, it's more difficult to explain, I find. Essentially, it's a balance. It's like our harmony of the elements working together to tell a story or to make me feel something, as I keep banging on about at the moment. I suppose it's tied to order. We're naturally drawn to order rather than chaos. So arranging things neatly is bringing some sort of order to things. And I think the more you're out there shooting, the sharper your attunement to order is going to be. The rules of composition can be really useful. And I'm sure I've heard this analogy somewhere before, but it's like scaffolding when you're building a house. You need it there to kind of get the framework of your photography in order. But if you leave it there afterwards, your house just looks crap. You need to remove the scaffolding to live in and enjoy the house. And that's like the rules of composition. You might need them there for a bit, but take them down, and that's when you get the most fulfillment and enjoyment from the practice of photography. I said I mentioned light before, and I used to think that a good scene properly composed in photography was enough. But I feel like light is the real game changer. Light, though, without a subject doesn't really work. It's one of those examples of a photo that looks nice, but there's no real substance to it. A subject without light can still work, but adding light in and having both together, that is when something really clicks. Embarrassingly, that took me a really long time to figure out. Why am I telling you this? Not sure. Why do I tell you anything? Again, not sure. I think when I do anything like this, I'm speaking to a version of my past self. Past version of myself, that's the one. And it's under the assumption that there are a lot of people in photography that are further back down the road I've come down. So by putting this out there, hopefully it helps them out. Hopefully it will have helped someone out, and discussing my curious take on light and how, well, early on I didn't really understand the impact it had. Maybe that might click with someone. So that's why. Anyway, good composition isn't always about where you stick the subject. It's about what you leave out as well, like that shot I showed you earlier with the road and the tree. Like I said, what you leave out can be as important as what you leave in. I think that's why I've been shooting more on a 35mm lens recently rather than a wide angle that I shot on a lot a few years ago. It's harder to leave things out the wider your angle of view is. A wider angle will include more of a scene, so it's really difficult to make those omissions and simplify a scene. Depending on what it is you're shooting, it can be hard to leave things out as well. So it's up to you to try and include it in the scene without it becoming a massive photo ruining distraction. When you're composing a photo, subject and interest should always come first. If they're not there, the photo probably won't work. Then you really, most of the time, need light, and then it's up to you to try and arrange things neatly to pull it all together. That's how I think about composition, and I think it works, even if I can't explain it quite as coherently as I'd like to. So yeah, I don't follow the rules, and I don't think you should either. Certainly not if you want to properly grow as a photographer. The things I'm more drawn to are being curious, looking to put emotion in my images, tell a story, and arrange things neatly, as I've said too much. And like I said at the start, creativity should be fun. Following rules is not fun. Sometimes necessary, but often not fun. Hope this has been useful. I'm looking forward to making a few slightly different videos coming up. And by that I mean videos where I'm not sat here, because honestly I'm quite bored of sitting here and I want things to be fun, like I've said. So if you want to see those, make sure you subscribed, and I look forward to showing those over the next few weeks. In this particular scene, there is quite a lot going on, so I'll kind of try and show you how I think about it. The conditions aren't great. It'd be much better if there was a bit of fog down there because there is a big bright patch, but we'll forget about that for now. This is purely about how I arrange things in a scene. So if I hit record on this, this is as wide as it'll go, so you can kind of see the different elements, and I want to try and see what I can get into the shot. Now initially I think I moved to here like this, and I positioned that tree on the left hand side quite close to the left hand edge, because I like how all of these branches in the foreground bring you into this tree in the background here. Obviously that's nowhere near the rule of thirds, because this tree here definitely isn't on a third line, but I really like how that looks. Now I think what I did was I kind of moved up onto this wall here to try and shoot down a little bit more on them, because then you can see with that it removes the bright patch of sky up there by shooting down on it. I've got to be careful on this wall because it is a little unsteady. You go too far up though and there's too much ground there, so it's all about just moving around and being careful about, like here, being careful with this tree here, like where this tree behind intersects with this one. So it's like building a puzzle. I did do another shot that was vertical here because I quite like these, but if you point it like this, if you're not careful, this branch here gets in the way. So I kind of came above it again so it fits neatly in below that other branch there. I think it was a bit like that, but then again you've got this bright patch here, but I'm not worried about that today. It's just thinking about things like that when it comes to putting a scene together. I just want to quickly talk about this picture here because this gives a good example of what I'm talking about. It's not the best picture in the world, but I can talk through my thinking quite easily on it. So we were just exploring and walking down this path here, and I saw this boat, which I knew would be the subject. And what I think most people would do is they stand somewhere on here where they were walking and they'd see this boat and take the shot going this way. Now there were all sorts of buildings here. It was uphill. I don't really like shooting uphill from quite close by, and it just didn't work. So I tried to kind of move around and work out a way of fitting these elements in the bottom third of the frame together so that they work neatly. And I came up behind the boat, and that opened up the entire scene. So by moving left and right, I could make sure that everything down here had separation and it was separate from the edges as well. And then you move up into the rest of the scene here, and this is important because it kind of sets the scene a bit. So there's separation here between the post and the hut. This is kind of separate as well. That little bit bothers me slightly. Then you've got this that comes out nice into scene. There's a separation here between the horizon and this post, and then I'm not sure if I can quite show it. I can move the picture like that, but this post, how it comes up nicely into this part of the mountain here and how that's separate. This is one of the best examples I can probably show of a scene that represents piecing things together nicely. Yes, it's not the best photo ever, but it's a really good demonstration of arranging things neatly, in my opinion.